Too much story.
Too much story. I mean, I wanted some songs, you know?
This is the Gospel of Musical Theater, a priestly look at some of your favorite musicals, with your hosts, Cathedral Deans and Musical Theater Queens, Nathan LaRude and Peter Elliott.
This is the Gospel of Musical Theater. I'm Peter.
I'm Nathan.
And, Nathan, I'm going to rely on you today because we're going to talk about Ragtime. I love Ragtime. I've seen it 3 times. Last time was probably about 10 years ago. Every time I've been in the theater and this thing is being presented, I'm blown away.
Yeah.
With the music, the story, but oh my God, is there a lot of plot going on here?
There is a lot of plot. Yes, there's a lot of story. In one way of thinking about Ragtime, it's almost 3 musicals all mashed up together. We're really telling 3 stories, right? And we get that right out of the jump. And actually, I think the opening number tells, in some ways, the story of Ragtime in dance, in music and dance, in ways that are really helpful for an audience. I think helpful for an audience because it's really three stories that do intersect, right? I mean, all 3 of the, but we're telling a story about a wasp family, and they're the first ones we hear from. I mean, like, whenever I see it, I think, like, those are, right, the show begins with Episcopalians, the show begins with Anglicans, the show begins with upper-class whites, they're dressed in their tennis whites, they're in front of a beautiful Victorian house, and they're singing la, 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 this very kind of precise, unemotive, the days were gently tinted, lavender pink, lemon and lime, ladies with parasols, fellows with tennis balls, there were gazebos and there were no Negroes.
And everything was right.
In Harlem, men and women of color forgot their troubles and danced and reveled to the music of Cole House Walker Jr. This was a music that was theirs and no one else's.
One young woman thought Cole House played just for her. Her name was Sarah.
Instantly, the stage is flooded with new energy, right? The black cast enters. So you've got, and that's a story that's set in Harlem and other places, New York City, but sort of, I think my sense is kind of recent immigrants from the South who have found a home in Harlem and are building a kind of the beginnings of the Harlem Renaissance, and a robust African-American cultural community and musical community. Ragtime really comes out of that neighborhood.
Right.
So that becomes kind of another plot layer, the story of Cole House Walker, this pianist, Sarah, the girl he falls in love with, their child, and kind of how their story intersects with the white family story. And then there's this third group of folks that kind of enter into the stage area, a bunch of immigrants from Eastern Europe, most of them Jewish, I think. So this is sort of the Tata is the kind of the lead character here. So Tata, mother in the Wasp family, and Cole House Walker really become our 3 main characters. And the show is, one of the things I was thinking about as I was watching it yesterday is, does the show privilege one of the 3? Is there a clear main character in Ragtime? Or is it, is the main character, we might even say that the concept, is Ragtime in some ways kind of a concept show, because it really is about the intersection of 3 groups and how social forces, we might say, enable and work against the building of family and community for these three groups: upper middle class white people, black folks in Harlem, and Eastern European immigrants, all kind of coexisting in the America of 1906 and the subsequent years.
And interestingly, perfect. Well, that's a great summary. And
there's your summary. Yeah.
Thank you. And interestingly, the white family are known only by their family names, like mother and father and little boy. That is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mother, father, little boy. Yeah. Almost. Yeah. My sense is like they're almost types, at least at the beginning. They're really, we never get names. We never learn their names, I don't think. They are types. Cole House Walker gets a name. In fact, that was the first thing we learned about him. That song is his name was Cole House Walker. Was a native of St. Louis some years before. So he's worked as a stevedore. He hears the music of Scott Joplin. He gets, buys himself some piano lessons working as a stevedore. He's kind of coming up, from kind of by his bootstraps, right? Like figures out how to join the world he wants to be a part of. He wants to be a musician. He wants to be an entertainer. We get the sense that his existence is pretty tentative, right? He doesn't come from money, obviously.
Right.
falls in love with this girl. We don't really ever learn that much about Sarah. She talks about going down south to see her folks at one point, so we get the sense that she was probably, I'm guessing, raised by sharecroppers in the South, but has come kind of, we might say, fled to the north. Also, though, like living hand to mouth, has very little. Gets pregnant by Coalhouse, and that's really what sets the story then into motion. Sarah has a traumatic. Coalhouse abandons her, leaves her pregnant, or she flees. I'm not entirely clear on the details there, but she flees to New Rochelle and attempts to bury her child when in the act of giving birth. That child is then discovered by Mother, the white, kind of the lead, the white woman at the center of the thing. Yeah. And she kind of in a moment, what would her husband is on an expedition with Admiral Perry, so her husband's out of the picture. He's left her in charge. You kind of get the sense that she's never really had to think for herself in any meaningful way, but here she is faced with this horrible situation, this baby who she has, I suppose saved. Then the mother is kind of brought in, and it becomes clear they're going to ship both of them off to, an asylum. The future does not look good for either baby or mother. So Mother intervenes and says, I will take responsibility for this woman and for her child. And that kind of is what breaks open this whole new chapter for her, for her family, and for everybody else then connected to this story. When she makes the choice to do what she knows her husband would not do, right? She sings, right. He would have gently closed the door, turned the key, and gently told me not to look for fear what I might see. What kind of woman would that have made me? And then this journey. So in some ways, like Mother's story is maybe the one that's kind of the earliest story we get. And it, she really, in some ways, she and Coalhouse Walker, I suppose, Mother and Coalhouse, really become the kind of two central characters. Tata is the immigrant, and he comes in and out of the story. But really, in some ways, Ragtime is really focusing on the white woman and the black musician. They're really the two who I think get the most. Certainly, the big I Want songs and the big 11 o'clock numbers go to Mother and to Coalhouse Walker.
Oh, get Kathleen! What's wrong? Get Kathleen, I tell you. Call the doctor. Is it alive? Oh, please, God, let it be. It's alive. It's a Negro child. It's a newborn baby boy. What kind of a woman would do such a thing? Why in God's name is my husband not here? I'm such a fool. Why did I say he was free to go? What am I to do? Where are your instructions, my dear? You left me lists, everything in lists. Well, your little lists aren't very helpful, I fear. Each day the maids trudge up the hill. The hired help arrives. I never stopped to think they might have lives beyond our lives.
Well, as you were describing that, I flashed on suddenly. This is kind of the Moses story with, isn't it? I mean, in a way. Sarah having...
Yep, the child who was rescued from the bulrushes. Mm-hmm.
Having the child rescued from the bulrushes, grows up in a court. I mean, white...
grows up in wealth and privilege. Yep.
Yeah. And with his mother there, with Sarah there.
At first, although she dies near the end of the first act. Sarah actually, I mean, when they cast Audra McDonald in this role, my sense is the role of Sarah went from a sort of incidental plot point to really, in some ways, becoming the heart of the show. I mean, musically, certainly, Daddy Son was one of the first kind of breakaway hits from Ragtime. Right, I remember when the cast album came out, every best friend I had, and they were all women who were getting ready to go on audition. Everybody was singing Daddy's. A lot of ill-advised performances by white girls of a song written for Audra. Every time I've seen a white girl do Daddy's Son, I've thought, oh, sweetheart, like this was not written for you. I mean, it's a great song. It's an aria. I mean, Daddy's Son is almost an aria.
Couldn't hear no music, couldn't see no light. Mama, she was frightened, crazy from the fright. Tears without no comfort, screams without no sound. Only darkness and pain, the anger and pain, the blood and the pain. I buried my heart in the
It was her breakout role, really.
It was her breakout role, yes.
Yeah.
I think it was her third Tony Award, which is kind of shocking. She won 3 Tonys by the age of 28. So she had won for Carousel, Best Supporting Actor. She had won for Masterclass in a non-musical.
Right.
So had featured, sort of supporting Tony roles, but this was her. Was this a lead? I don't remember if this was a lead actress role.
I think it was.
This is her.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is her third Tony though, by the age of 28, which is astounding. I mean, but this was what established her as a breakout superstar. Absolutely, Ragtime was kind of a role that they built for Audra McDonald and for her talents. Yeah. And she, I mean, if you've got somebody like Audra McDonald in the role of Sarah, she will walk away with the show.
Absolutely,
she's incredible. I watched a bootleg of the Broadway production last night. There is a bootleg that exists, but even in a grainy, I mean, this would have been 1998, so they weren't using a cell phone to film it. It was probably a camcorder, in a backpack up in some balcony. So that the fidelity of sound and image is pretty crappy. And even still, the magnetism of her performance, when she is on stage, you can't take your eyes off of her. She's galvanizing in the grainiest possible reproduction. Just watching her on my tiny little phone last night, I was it just chills up my spine. She's such an incredible performer.
So referencing Masterclass makes me think of Terrence McNally.
Yes, who is the book writer for this show.
Right.
Yeah.
And describing as you have this massive plot is because this is from a huge book by E.L. Doctorow. That Garth Drabinsky, the Toronto-based entrepreneur who brought Showboat to Broadway, big productions of Sunset Boulevard, Joseph. When I was living in Toronto in the 90s, Garth Drabinsky was the flavor of the month. He built theaters all across Canada. There's one in Vancouver. That is, interestingly enough, now a mega church. It was sold by Live End.
Yeah. When they went belly up, that was a piece
when they went belly up, and Garth had to have some time inside in the Canadian penitentiary system.
Not the most honest theatrical dealer we've ever encountered.
No, an entertainment lawyer. I mean, anyway, we could talk about entertainment lawyers, but we won't.
I mean, people who front Broadway shows don't tend to be the most, ethical of individuals.
And this show in particular was $14 million to produce the original. It was huge. They had, Houdini, who is a character in the show, hanging upside down on the stage. They had fireworks. They had a working Model T Ford. And you saw the opening number. The house that the family lives in comes out on a track on the stage. Yeah. It opens up like a dollhouse. I mean, it is extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
It wasn't deemed a success on Broadway, even though it won some Tony Awards.
I was going to say, they probably didn't make any money on it,
They didn't make any money
I bet it was a money loser, yeah.
But it has gone on to have so expensive. I saw an early production of it.
36 musicians in the pit. I think there's got to be 50 actors in that company, the original Broadway company. Because it's basically 3 choruses. There's got to be some overlap between the Immigrant Chorus and the Wasp Chorus, but basically three full choruses, and then I think 13 kind of lead role. It's a huge company, huge orchestra, huge set. The thing is just a behemoth when you do it at that scale. There is now a sort of scaled down version of Ragtime that can be done as a concert production, can be done, basically with 13 actors on a kind of a thrust stage with a piano reduction. So I've seen both versions. I've seen, obviously the kind of the original Broadway production
in the smaller
still
production.
Really works. That's my sense too. Yeah. The story and the music really actually work when you slim them down. That's a very different theatrical experience, but does give you a kind of intimacy and works to tell the story. Yeah. But the original production was huge.
And in the original production, because I've seen some clips of it as well over the last couple of days, when the whole cast, all 3, the immigrant cast, the black cast, and the white cast, step forward at the end of that first number and are singing just full-throated out into the audience. I mean, it's worth seeing Ragtime for the first 14 minutes, and for that moment. It is thrilling in ways that I... having seen it a couple times, it's a frisson moment. I mean, it's
a frisson moment, yeah.
Singing a dream, la 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 la. A strange insistence
would maybe argue that Ragtime, I think, is maybe the most successful opening number that I know of in a Broadway, in all of Broadway. I mean, partially because it's a great song. I mean, I think it's the first song that Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty wrote for the piece. This is the songwriting team. They were kind of auditioning for. I think Garth Drabinsky was talking to a bunch of different songwriting teams, and they wrote.
He made it into a contest, kind of like
it was kind of a song contest. Yeah,
and they won, and it was that song.
They won. I think it was Ragtime. Musically, it's perfect, but also, basically tells the whole story of Ragtime using dance or kind of movement of peoples
and scenery.
Scenery.
It really works. And the Terrence McNally book, I mean, the Doctorow novel runs, I think, over 1,000 pages.
Have you ever read it? Have you read it?
Oh, no. I mean, you know me and plots. I would...
Too much story.
Too much story. I mean, I wanted some songs, but he reduced it to 60 pages. And Doctorow approved of it. That Terrence McNally, who I think is one of the great playwrights, may he rest in peace, of our time, a gay man, had amazing capacity to take complexity. Masterclass is another example. It's a fairly complex story, but makes it theatrical and makes the theatricality move his audiences. So, I don't think we can talk about Ragtime without a big shout out to the
Terrence
book.
McNally.
Yeah. And it's probably one of the strongest books of...
I agree. Yeah, it's a very strong script. It tells a lot of story, mostly in pretty elegant. Lets the music do a lot of the storytelling, which is the right. Obviously the musical. But Terrence McNally really understands musical theater structure. He lets the structure work for him. It's not quite traditional music. It's not a traditional musical theater. It's not Rodgers and Hammerstein. There's not, it's telling a story that is clearly coming out of a novel, but musicalizes it, I think, in ways that really work and gives you dramatic. Gives you characters to kind of, you kind of get to pick, right? Like which of these three major characters are is kind of going to grab your heart in a certain kind of way. And I think a lot of that probably depends on who you are and who your people are and which of these stories. My sense is these are three very recognizable, we might say classic American stories. Although, as you pointed out, there's a number of American stories that are elided when you focus just on WASPs in New Rochelle, black folks in Harlem, and immigrants arriving in Ellis Island.
Right.
The world of 1906 America is not reducible to those three groups, certainly. And there's a whole kind of missing piece there that the show doesn't really deal with.
When you and I have taught this course in a Canadian context, and often we do Ragtime after we do some of the pieces about indigenization and so forth, I remember, and I had not thought about it until one of our students one day said, "Where are the indigenous people in this? There should be a fourth group that comes out onto stage to talk about the formation of culture in the United States of America. Whites, obviously, African Americans, obviously, Eastern European, largely Jewish immigrants." I always think about the immigrants as kind of, that's the Fiddler on the Roof cast that suddenly comes on stage.
Yes. Yeah. It is kind of, it's like it's basically Fiddler on the Roof meets Pearly meets, I'm trying to think of what the white, what
Music
show,
Man.
Kind of. It's kind of Music Man meets Fiddler on the Roof meets Pearly. Yeah, a little bit. And all of those musical idioms very much, kind of classic Americana for the, they get marches, they get, kind of flag. I mean, it's like the score to the Music Man a little bit. The cast, the Shtetl cast gets kind of, a lot of clarinet, klezmer. I mean, some beautiful kind of Fiddler on the Roof echoing stuff. And then you get the ragtime, the dance music of the Harlem set, which, some of the best music. And the Getting Ready Rag is, is a great number and tells you a whole bunch of plot in, basically a dance number. In some ways, certainly the original production of Ragtime is a dance show. There's a lot of choreography to this thing. I think the kind of stripped down production, the dance doesn't, you're not necessarily casting 13 dancers who can also sing and act. It's a little more, you let the music do more of it. But the original production does a lot with dance. It was beautifully choreographed and really tells a lot of the story that way.
And there is an absent partner. The indigenous people, the sense of America, of Canada, our myths are the same in this way. When white people tell the story, it's like it was this uncharted wilderness into which our ancestors came, and we made a home here. no acknowledgement that already this land
there
was
were people
settled.
there.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
with
Yeah.
rich history in every sense of the word, like not just a beautiful cultural history and artistic, but also conflict and war, all the things that human beings do, that was all present here. But industrialization, the whiteness of the early explorers and the Europeans who founded, look at my language even, who first settled parts of North America, both in the United States and Canada. The erasure of the indigenous experience is just an absence in Ragtime. Yeah, but I mean, it's not working from it. That we're working from the Doctorow novel.
From the Doctorow novel, sure.
Yeah,
That's not the story Doctorow is telling.
yeah.
Although it is an interesting. I don't even. I want to call it a blind spot necessarily, but Ragtime does traffic in. Well, I mean, I think this is both a Canadian and an American myth. It's kind of we're all from somewhere else,
Yes.
right? I mean, it's in some when we've taught the show, we've sort of investigated the melting pot imagery. And I know in Canada, as in the U.S., we've sort of pulled, at least many progressives have kind of distanced ourselves a little bit from the idea that the great national project of our two countries is everybody from somewhere else emigrating here, coming here from somewhere else, and then our differences being homogenized in. Right. Actually, when I was in fifth grade, we did a little fifth grade musical. It was about the immigrant experience, and there was a song called "Melting Pot." It was very much like it was probably this would have been about 15 years before Ragtime, but very like this was the story we were being invited to kind of own as a group of all white kids, right? Yeah. That America was a melting pot. We all of our and it was sort of a celebration of that, right? Like all of our differences had been erased away. We all just got thrown together. Your people are from Italy, my people are from Africa. Your people, but we're all from somewhere else. Ragtime actually has a little bit of that moment, right? At the very beginning of the show, Father's standing on the ship with Admiral Perry, and there's an
explorer,
Negro,
right? I mean,
an explorer. Right.
The people who discover. Anyway, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, but there's a watchman there who's black, and they're talking, and he says like my people were also brought here on ships, and there's this kind of uncomfortable moment on the crew when it's like these two kind of wealthy white guys are like, right, we're not going to talk about slavery, but then they're watching this kind of rag ship come in, the immigrants who are coming in, right, and Father says like, what is that ship on the distance, and then sings to Tata, right, like a salute to the man on the deck of that ship, a salute to the immigrant stranger, heaven knows why you'd make such a terrible trip, may your own God protect you from danger. I mean, so all of the kind of all of the dismissiveness of his class is coming out, but there is this sort of sense of identification there, right? Like my people at some point probably were. He never really says. Tata's ancestors presumably came over on the Mayflower or something like that. He's been in America for a long time. Tata is coming here now. There's the watchman who kind of reminds them there was a whole nother immigration experience. Other people who were brought here against their will on ships. But as you say, the story is we're all from somewhere else in this new virgin land that nobody was, we're kind of creating a society ourselves. And there is a huge missing piece. There's a huge lacuna in that story that Ragtime doesn't really investigate in any meaningful
Doesn't
way.
Investigate. Yeah. And my Canadian friends would want to say the Canadian myth, anyway, I think it's largely myth, is that as opposed to the American melting pot, we had a mosaic where different cultures were allowed to keep their identity, but we all were on this land in our own cultural forms, respecting our traditions, not melting them, but living side by side. Again, it's another distinctiveness. It's a myth.
How has that? I mean, not to, but like how is that myth serving you?
Well, Canada? Yeah, and I don't think I think it's yes and no. Because I think the overwhelming forces, and this is not just to get back to Ragtime, but to get back to Ragtime, are the forces of capitalism and industrialization, which, demand a conformity to a higher power, which isn't, in the U.S., the myth of democracy and the equality of everybody, which, the founders were slave owners. So equality has to be, and we'll get into this more in Hamilton, I think, when we talk about that musical, but the overwhelming forces of industrialization, of capitalism, which was running rampant in this age, because we're really between the Gilded Age here and the Progressive Era. That's kind of this moment of ragtime. And the Progressive Era is, I was going to say motored, and probably motored is the right verb here.
That may be the right verb here.
By Henry T. Ford, by the Ford Motor Company of Canada, by the introduction of the assembly line, where the equality isn't this kind of lovely romantic notion of, isn't it wonderful that we're all equal? No, equality means if you're a poor white, if you're African American, if you're a European immigrant, your equality is that you all have to work for the same shit salary on a back-breaking conveyor belt to serve the purposes of the oligarchs, Henry Ford and his friends. So nationalism, I think, in Canada, and it's not good for Canadians to comment on the United States, but is this kind of myth that allows for the accumulation of capital amongst a small group of people while keeping the rest of the folks. God, I feel like Emma Goldman all of a sudden here, you know?
Well, I was going to say, Ragtime does, I mean, like, this is one of Ragtime's great themes, tension points. I want to. Yes. So I mean, I think about the Henry Ford number, right? Like where you hear the clang of the steel and see right. My people. Well, here's my theory of what this country is moving toward. I mean, like he's basically and you see it like played out on the stage, right? He's on this balcony, this kind of industrialized balcony that is slowly being lowered while basically the entire company is all kind of right, like they're doing the kind of mechanized right. As if they're on an assembly line. And you watch Henry Ford basically telling you, right, here's my theory of what equality looks like. Every worker, a cog in motion. Well, that's the notion of Henry Ford. One man tightens and one man ratchets. And, even people who ain't too clever can learn to tighten a nut forever.
Speed up the belt, Sam. Speed up the belt, Sam. Speed up the, speed up the, speed up the, speed up the belt. Transworld Junction will sweep the nation. A simple notion, the world's reward. Even people who ain't too clever can learn to tighten a nut forever. Attach one pedal or pull one lever. Henry Ford. Henry Ford. Henry Ford. Henry Ford. Grab your goggles and climb
I'm ready, Lord.
Right? So this is sort of his answer to the problem of social inequality, we might say, right? Like anybody can serve an assembly line. You don't have to, you don't have to have any education at all. This is his vision for equality, we might say. You watch that balcony basically push down so far that the workers are trapped. That's
underneath
what Houdini kind of comes underneath
right.
him, right? So like visually, the show is certainly inviting us to critique everything that Henry Ford is saying. Now, I also want it, right, like it's being performed at the Ford Center for the Performing Arts, and it's all Ford Motor Company money that is making this thing go. So, it's like how robust can Ragtime be in its criticism of capitalism when basically the Ford Motor, I mean, one way that we could think about Ragtime is it's a 3-hour-long commercial for Ford Motor Company. I mean, I think about kind of like the other kind of great signature musical number in Ragtime is Wheels of a Dream. Right? It's a hymn to car. They even, and actually at the end of the song, like you realize, it's Sarah and Colehouse, like gazing at, it's like this new family, this black family. They've been reunited. They've got a child. This is their, they're kind of this beautiful. It's one of the best love duets in the entire Broadway canon. I mean, like it's especially when it's Brian Stokes Mitchell and Audra McDonald singing.
Oh my God!
I mean, talk about a frisson moment. But they finally at the end, right? These two voices together, beyond that road, beyond this lifetime, that car full of hope will always gleam. With the promise of happiness and the freedom he'll live to know. They're holding their son, right? He'll travel with head held high just as far as his heart can go. Which at one level, it's right, like it's our son. It's a promise of, right, like he's going to have a different life than we have had. This is the promise of the progressive era, right? Like he's a black child born 1906. So like he's Martin Luther King, I suppose, right? He is the generation who will cause the civil, or the beginnings of kind of the new generation.
But the Wheels of a Dream is
It's
wheels.
It's the car. And it's Glee on the Broadway stage. It was a fully, a whole a whole built Model T that they drove around that. I mean, it was amazing. It was like the helicopter in Miss Saigon. I mean, it was an amazing moment when Coalhouse drives out in this Model T. It's kind of a commercial for the car.
Beyond that road, beyond this lifetime, that car full of hope will always gleam with the promise of happiness and the freedom he'll live to know. He'll travel with head held high, just as far as his heart can go. And he will ride, our sun will ride on the wheels of a
Well, and the car defined so much of the building of North America. You know, the parish churches that the first settlers built all over this continent were soon made obsolete because churches were in neighborhoods, you know, where people could walk to them, and they served the community on the town square. And then as the suburbs grew in the 50s, there were, and then the motor car, the ubiquity of the motor car meant that you didn't have to go to your neighborhood church anymore. You know, you could go wherever you
could drive.
Yeah.
You could go to whatever church had the biggest parking lot. And actually my sense is the churches that grew in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s were the churches that added a lot of parking. Actually, that's still kind of true.
It's still kind of true.
If you want to grow your church in the suburbs, you have to create it's basically the mega mall, the mall model.
It's the mall.
Right? Like there needs to be enough parking in order for people to be able to drive there. And then drive home.
It's fascinating, you know, sort of this area that we're so aware of the ecological crisis and all that sort of thing, fueled in some part, obviously, by mega industry, but also by the exhaust of so many cars, you know, just so many cars. We were recently in Toronto. In Toronto, the big highway that goes through the center of the city is a 16-lane freeway, kind of Los Angeles-like, taking us, you know, right to La La Land. And when I lived there 30 years ago, the highway had sort of busier and not so busy periods. And today it seems to be busy 24/7. Car after car after car. I mean, some Teslas and that sort of thing, but good God. So yeah, the motor car, the development of the industrialization of the landscape, the subjugation of workers, immigrants, African Americans, and uneducated whites. And then, you know, I am enthused about Ragtime. When I think about it, I can't hold the plot in my mind, but then you think about Henry Houdini, the great escape artist, who's in the immigrant company here.
Yes, very much aligned with the immigrant. If you're trapped and failure seems imminent, think of Houdini, that fabulous immigrant. Break those chains with all you possess. This is America. This is the land of success. That's what he sings to Tata. And it is, I mean, like then, right, Tata and the other immigrants start pushing against this balcony thing that is coming down on top of them, and they send it back up, right? They push Henry forward. Now, that's also kind of when Emma Goldman enters the story and starts to organize those workers, and that becomes kind of the Tata story becomes trying to make it as a street peddler, going to work in a factory, becoming involved in the IW, you know, the Wobblies era, organizing for, then almost losing his daughter in this really traumatic moment. And then the next time we see him, he's a millionaire. He's Baron Ashkenazi, the movie maker. So he becomes kind of Hollywood, we might say. Actually, Tata's story, basically he becomes Louis B. Mayer, right? Like he founds a movie studio, becomes fabulously wealthy, and raises his children. The end of the story is that he and mother end up getting married, and they raise, you know, this kind of mixed little girl, his daughter, and little boy, mother's son, become siblings, and together they raise Coalhouse Walker's child. So the final image of Ragtime, the supposedly hopeful image of like the society we're building, is basically two white parents raising the adopted child of the two black people who died So I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of questions about kind of the image of America that Ragtime gives us at the end. But it is basically it's an immigrant story, right? Ragtime is
Right.
really interested in telling the immigrant story. Certainly the 1906 immigrant story, but I mean, what I think American audiences are always being invited to think about is where is the contemporary resonance of this material, right? Thinking
Right.
about who's sitting in that audience, where do we come from, who are our people, and to what degree is America still, kind of offering this promise? And then the show does, like kind of examines this idea of American success. Right? What does
Yes.
that mean? What does it mean to promise a lifestyle where hundreds of millions of people will leave the land of their birth and come to this, come to, I mean, in some ways, like, I feel like this is the situation, obviously there's always a situation, but like, certainly in current contemporary American politics, we are watching this play out in front of us,
Yes.
right? Like, hundreds of thousands of people who are, braving unimaginable horrors
Unimaginable
to cross
horrors.
to cross over with this dream that like this is a place where we can be safe, where we can make a living, where our children will have a different life than we have. I mean, like that story rings so contemporary to me. And then, I mean, the heartbreak, the anger, the vitriol. In some ways, Ragtime is really telling the story of what happens when that dream sours. Right? Coalhouse Walker's car is destroyed by a bunch of Irish police. His wife is shot, or his girlfriend is shot, by police officers. So he turns into a vigilante. Tata kind of does too, right? Like, I mean, when the dream sours, these men turn to the only tool that they really have, which is violence and guns and fireworks, I suppose. They know how to blow things up. So there is kind of an interesting, sometimes vaguely gendered critique of the capitalist equality narrative, the melting pot narrative, we all just kind of bring our differences together and build a new society where, like it's all, you can bring yourself up on your own bootstraps because this is a classless society. It's a society where race is incidental, and Ragtime, I mean, certainly at one level,
bullshit
like,
to that.
Bullshit. That's absolutely not true. But then does kind of, but then offers us this car, Wheels of a Dream. That car full of hope will always gleam. So, I mean, like the whole thing is being bankrolled by the Ford Foundation. I mean, there is a little bit of me that's like, I don't trust the show to give me an image of hope that might transcend what is in other ways a very clear-eyed critique of the capital. Emma Goldman is a character in the thing. She really is a kind of one of the, I think, most significant historical figures in the piece.
Yes.
But the show doesn't ever quite, it still wants to give us an image of hope that is kind of based in the capitalist model. I mean, it really is the car. The car is the hope at the end of Ragtime. Or at least the family, the nuclear family, is the image of hope.
And it I mean, the $14 million to produce the show. I mean, capitalism writ large here. And I find the Houdini character interesting because, he's an escape artist. And to put him in the category of the immigrants, the Eastern European immigrants, the Jews, Hungarians, Russians, etc., or Jews from Hungary and Russia and so forth, that his act sort of incarnates what they're all trying to do, which is to escape. And I think that's Doctorow's brilliance of giving us a symbol, giving us a central figure that we can look at and think, oh my God, that's what's going on deeply, is wanting to escape both from the poverty of Eastern Europe and then from the oppression of living within a capitalist society of America. And then, as you just said, translate all of that into our 2024, 2025 with the floods of immigrants coming from the southern border. When we were in Europe last year, in Italy, the enormous number of people from North Africa, these patterns of immigration, the Houdini-ism of our time as well, people needing to escape and arriving only to find out that they need to hide or escape again because of the prevailing socio-political, usually capitalist forces that can't absorb. I mean, that's the kind of nice way to put it. We can't absorb all these immigrants. The truth is that the white settlers are being displaced from jobs because of immigrants, or at least that is the myth that gets told. And so once again, they're, far from being a story that goes back to the early part of the 20th century, Ragtime, in a lot of ways, brings us right into the present moment where immigration is the major social political issue.
Yes. It's really a story about, the 70s, then the 90s, then the 2020s. Yes, that's it. Yeah, the show, certainly the material wants to have a kind of timeless quality there. By telling a story about a previous era in American history, we can see ourselves reflected and maybe come to understand ourselves a little more deeply. I think that is the promise that Ragtime offers.
Look at my daughter, God. Why have you brought us here? How can I feed her, or clothe, or protect her here? Where's the America we were supposed to get? Was it a silhouette? Hey, mister, here in America, anything you want you can do. Sucker, step up, and I'll cut you out your own guarantee. Come see the artist, big shot, oh yes, red, white, and blue, hooray, and God bless. I'm a success, I'm a success, success, success!
There's another thread through Ragtime, and it's the experience of women.
Yes.
And that becomes a really, so Evelyn Nesbit, Emma Goldman, Sarah, and Mother all make up a really interesting set of characters that I think allow us to tell another story. It's a little, it's kind of underneath the kind of the social movement stories, which is really about men and power. There's this other story about women and the choices that women do and don't have that I think Ragtime, in some ways, like the heart of the show, in some ways, is sort of the women in the show. Or at least they get a lot of the best songs. And Marin Mazzie and Audra McDonald are two pretty powerhouse singers to have in your original company. So it's no wonder that, she kind of walks away with the show in some really, Brian Stokes Mitchell is incredible as Coal House Walker. But Marin Mazzie gets a couple, but gets a great I Want song at the beginning of the show where she's saying goodbye to her husband and sort of beginning to unpack some of the choices that she's made. But then she gets really, I think there's kind of two 11 o'clock numbers in Ragtime.
At least.
At least, there's about 5 11 o'clock numbers. Everybody gets a big finale. The show ends about 18 times before it finally ends. But Back to Before has become kind of one of the great, and I think is kind of the show's most successful one characters giving you kind of this is how the last 3 hours have changed me as a character, right? You really get a sense of her trajectory in that song. There was a time when you were the person in motion, I was your wife, it never occurred to want more.
Occurred to want more. You were my sky, my moon, and my stars, and my ocean. We can never go back to before.
So at one level, that's Mother's own experience of her marriage, right? We can't just pretend that we're the same people we were 10 years ago when we made those vows. I think at the kind of the social level of the show is all, it's the world of 1906 and those people dressed in, we're on the eve of the First World War.
Right.
And you can see that in her costuming, right? Her costumes is completely different. She's wearing this kind of open blouse. She's lost her corset. Her hair is loose. She's become kind of, it looks like a woman kind of on the eve of the First World War, right? The precursor of the 20s. We're moving into the era in which women are going to basically, kind of make Evelyn Nesbit style choices.
Right.
Yeah, so there's that kind of trajectory that I think, especially I remember kind of sitting in an audience in 1998. That was telling a story that didn't feel yet this is pre-Me Too, right? It's kind of there was a very particular moment there that song was. It was doing something really interesting, I think, in 1998. I think now, 2024, is still doing something very interesting.
It's still doing. That's what I was just thinking. Yeah, the nostalgia of wanting to go back to before is that mega, at some way. And, in the American political system, we've got a party that's wanting to look back and say that was all great. And we've got another party that's saying, we're never going back. The Kamala Harris slogan.
We can never go back to before.
We can never go back to before. We're not going back. That's the tagline. Yeah.
And Mother's a little more. Part of what I find so powerful about that song, I think, is it is not just a political cri de coeur. Right? She is not just, although, halfway through the song, all these other women's voices come in. I've actually seen this song staged where Mother is kind of joined on stage by this kind of army of suffragettes, really. I mean, it kind of, it heightens the political stakes of kind of where the basket into which she's throwing her eggs, if we're going to, right? Like, she's basically becoming a suffragette. But there is also, I mean, like, when Maren Massey sings it, like, when this is, done by a really strong actor, there's this deep kind of sense of regret. But not, not regretting I've made the wrong choices, but like this remembering fondly a time when I was very safe. You were my star, my sun, my moon, and my ocean. Like, there was a time when that man was my entire world, and to a certain degree, I was pretty happy. Now, I don't want to go back to that way of being, but it's not just a dismissal of women who make. It's not just nostalgia, and not just then. It's sort of like anybody who makes that choice is, making a morally bankrupt. I mean, she doesn't quite say that, but you get the sense that at least there's room in that song for women are going to make a lot of different choices in terms of how they interact with men economically, in terms of gender politics, sexuality, all of marriage, which is basically an economic model. I love that the song illustrates the heartbreak at the center of what Mother has been through, right? Which is that she has now found her voice, she's found her agency, she's going to live a very different life going forward than the life, and a very joyful life going forward. But there is the loss of saying goodbye to the man and the world that she thought she was destined for, and that, and to a certain degree, that she had a certain kind of safety and a certain kind of privilege in that world.
Yeah, and it picks up a tone, I think, that is both socio-political and also has to do with the process of aging, and seeing the experience of looking back and realizing, the world continues to beckon and memories get lodged in a particular moment. And you can't go, not with the nostalgia. I mean, there's some nostalgia, some sadness. There's also this kind of, that's just the way it is. That's my sense of we can never go back to before. That it's the wheels of a dream. It's the wheels of things that keep propelling us, into the future and so forth. Yeah. It's a great song.
Yeah. Dreams then, because, right? Like, because back to before is kind of what she's saying in that song is that world never really existed. It was kind of a dream, which, and we had it so beautifully illustrated for us in the opening number when they all came on stage and they were posing, and this beautiful all white world, right? Like her all white world. They even sing, right? Like nothing threatens us. Now, immediately the world happens to them.
Right.
But she is, I think she is both acknowledging the deep kind of the nostalgia and the loss of something that was precious to her, but also then realizing it never really existed. Right? Like that was a dream. I'm awake now. I mean, like, this is the positive side of being woke, I suppose, which is a problematic word. But that's basically what she's saying is, right? It's like, I woke up from this dream. It was a beautiful dream. It came with not beautiful for everybody and came at a cost. But for me, as a woman at the center of that, at the center of this very cosseted, protected world, it was a kind of fantasy I was living. Now that gets juxtaposed so interestingly then with the other kind of dream trope, the kind of the dream trajectory of Ragtime, which is that car, right? And what the dream of American capitalism and success means for characters who are not Mother, who were not born into the world of privilege, but who aspire to something like what those people represent for them. And then, like in some ways that dream gets betrayed or it's undermined, but there's always, like the show ends with a kind of version of Wheels of a Dream, right? Beyond that road, beyond this lifetime, that car full of hope will always gleam with the promise of happiness. which I don't, yeah, like I don't know. I have a lot of questions.
I have a lot of questions about it. Yeah.
So theologically, maybe this is the theological bridge, because there's also Sarah's funeral, right? That's kind of the other new music, but then
I
Sarah's
want to
funeral,
talk about new music with you. Yeah.
which is where, I mean, it's as theological as the show ever gets, right? That there is a new music at work. That's kind of new music. Kind of is the beginnings of that trend. And that's really the first time we get, well, the opening number, but then we kind of ragtime really comes into the score. I mean, the ragtime as a musical style becomes, I think, emblematic of some people can hear this new music. Other people are hearing it, but it's very dissonant. It's very threatening to them. I mean, even just the ways that they talk about what it's like to hear Coalhouse Walker play ragtime on their out-of-tune spin-it piano for the first time, right? The younger brother sings, "Where have I been? How did?" Or no, I guess father sings, "Where have I been? How did we change?" Caught in this strange new music, and then he says, "Say, why can't I hear the song?" Right? Father can't hear this music.
Right.
The younger brother and mother can. Right? His fingers stroke those keys. Every note says please. Every chord says turn my way. I thought I knew what love was, but these lovers play new music, haunting me, taunting me. My love was never half as true. So, I mean, at one level, that's the commercialism of African American culture for white people, right? I mean,
On
like
one
I have
hand, yes.
on one hand. On the other hand, like, what an amazing song about music. I
Well,
mean, in
yeah.
some ways, ragtime's about music before it's about anything else.
When I think about Carmen, when the opera Carmen, when it first played in Paris, the audiences booed it because they said, "We don't understand. We cannot hear music here. It's not tuney. This is all dissonant." And I think today, I think of Carmen as one of the most tuney operas that I've ever heard. It just kind of big tune after big tune, but literally people couldn't hear it. And I think then to your kind of theological, or to our theological project, I mean, I sometimes think about the resurrection that way, right? Mm-hmm. The newness of life that I think the resurrection is wanting to talk about. You can't explain it so much as you experience it, you hear it, you're in, I mean, the way your former presiding bishop of blessed memory, Frank Griswold, used to talk about it as being caught up in the force field of the resurrection, of new life, right? And it's not something that can be taught so much as caught. In the same way that I can't tell anybody, you've got to love this song. Once you hear it, you'll love it. Because they literally may not hear it. Like, it takes a long time for a melody to settle in. And I think, and ragtime is playing with all of that as well.
Really playing with that. Yes, at a musical level, certainly, right?
At
like,
a
what is the
musical
melody?
level.
Yeah. But then kind of almost extrapolating out from there, right? Like music becomes such a potent symbol for everything that is changing about who's playing the music, who's consuming the music, who can hear it, who can't, who is able to sing in harmony, who gets solo lines. I mean, the show is working at all kinds of very dense levels in terms of how the music functions. Yeah, I love thinking about the resurrection that way, right? As a kind of new music, haunting me, somehow taunting me. My love was never half as true, right? So it is an image of, I mean, in ragtime, it's kind of an image of sex, I suppose, or at least, but not just, right? Like there's an eroticism to it, but it's more than just the sensual. You know, there's something deeply spiritual, I think, that is calling to these very buttoned up white people about this new music that down in Harlem they are playing, and they're dancing to it, and they're having children out of wedlock to it. You know, they're making choices that good white people don't make, but there is something haunting, taunting. There's something of resurrection in this music. It offers them a different way of being in the world that is going to come at a cost. It comes at a cost for all of them, but some of them are able to make that transition. Younger brother is a complicated character. He's the one who basically kind of shows up at Coalhouse Walker's door. This brotherhood. We are all Coalhouse. Coalhouse has called all of these black men, all of these disenfranchised black men together. They've taken over the Morgan Library at the end of the thing, and Mother's younger brother becomes, this is, in some ways, it's the most complicated song in the whole piece. He wanted to say, Emma Goldman narrates for these. I mean, here again, a woman doing all this emotional labor for these two men who can't communicate with each other. He wanted to say, I am not who I appear to be. He wanted to say, do not blame me for my past. He wants so bad, this white privileged boy who just wants to be accepted by these black radicals. And in the show, they embrace, it's like they open up their arms and they embrace him. And at the end of the song is like, they realize for a moment in the darkness, we're the same.
Yeah.
Which is it's one of these moments where it's like, wait, are they? Can Coalhouse Walker and Mother's younger brother
are they the same? Yeah.
Are they the same? I mean, I think I know what the show is trying to say there, which is they are both human beings, right? Like the level of human beings, But it is, it's like this is Il Doctoro and a bunch of white people writing a show for white people. Basically, I mean, this is how, socially woke white people, this is how you can be the same as African Americans, as black people that feels to me very much like 1998. I recognize a lot of 1998
Fair enough.
in that image. I don't think that's how I don't think that's a song that I would write in that way now.
I don't think you could write this show now. I don't think you could produce this show now. The other thing just about new music is it's interesting that it comes from the African American and it's the white people who are trying, like the new comes from the margins always, never from the center. And the centering of religion on the white experience is so impoverished because the resurrection is always going to come from the edges, not from the center. The new music emerges from where? Hidden places.
Yeah. Well, from the tomb. I mean, theologically, right? From places of death and heartbreak. And so, of course, Ragtime comes out of the African-American experience, right? It's coming out of the experience of being disenfranchised and being brutalized and being subject to incredible violence. I mean, I think the other great, powerful musical moment is the funeral piece. And maybe this is where we kind of want to come in for a landing a little bit on Ragtime, right? There's a day of hope, may I live to see, where our hearts are happy and our souls are free. Let the new day dawn, O Lord, I pray. We'll never get to heaven till we reach that day.
There are Negroes out there. There are people out there. Give the people a day of peace. A day of pride. A day of justice. We have been denied. Let the new day come.
So what is that day? I mean, it's a day of peace, day of hope. I mean, I think it's the New Jerusalem. I mean, I think this, and the show is very deliberately treading in the Black church musicality and imagery, scriptural imagery, right? It's a Black singer who's leading the funeral, and there's also, there's the kind of the undercurrent of voices, what they did to her, what they took from her. She had life in her. It's not that her life has meaning because she martyred herself to the cause, right? Right. I mean, the song at least is adding in voices of anger, voices of frustration. She should not have died. What happened to her was wrong. What we must do is make sure that there's a world in which Sarah no longer gets done down in the streets. There are women out there. There are Negroes out there. Give the people a day of hope. But then, the kind of the rousing bit at the end is angry. There's anger in that. It's the Act One closer, right? Right. But it is also, it's church. We'll never
It's
get to
church.
heaven till
we reach that
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not the day of the general resurrection, right? It's not when everybody goes to heaven and there's pie in the sky with Jesus when you die. It's the social gospel.
This is social revolution.
Social revolution.
This is the turning over the tables of the money changers in the temple. This is disrupting the powers and principalities of, in this case, capitalism and its cousin racism, which are keeping people subjugated.
Yeah.
That day.
I wish that the show had chosen to reprise that song
rather than the Wheels
instead
of a Dream.
Of Wheels of a Dream. Yeah. I get why. I mean, Wheels of the Dream was going to be, they were setting it up as the breakout hit of the show, which it became. It's fine. But Till We Reach That Day, I think is Ragtime at its, certainly Ragtime at its most theological.
At its theological best, yeah.
And that's a theological agenda that I believe in. I don't necessarily trust the promise of the American automobile. I do trust the promise of the Black church.
Yeah.
Right? Which is that, in the midst of heartbreak and violence, you don't turn to retribution. You turn to a vision of a world made new, and that we actually can be a part of building that world now through solidarity, through intersectionality. It's a political project that they're skating. There's all kinds of ways. And it's all filtered through a white gaze. So, lots of inherent difficulties there for a contemporary audience, certainly. But I think that song works musically because it's giving us the idiom of the Black church.
Yeah.
And there is nothing more powerful, musically, dramatically, or lyrically, than that theological tradition. It's the cross. It's the cross and the lynching tree, right?
It's the social gospel.
It's the social gospel.
It's seeing religion not so much as a way to ensure life after death. This is saying the project of God is building, it's the city of God. It's building the New Jerusalem. Yeah. It's saying the struggle is worth it, so that something new can emerge and a new music can emerge that
and
can
a new
be
music
heard.
can emerge.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
What an amazing show this is. Oh my God.
It is. It's one of my, I was thinking last night, Ragtime, I say this with a little bit of hesitancy because of, not all of it has aged well. I think it's my favorite musical.
Yeah.
That's a big thing to say. But in terms of all of the things that a musical can do, Ragtime does for me. It gives me all of the things that I want in a musical.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. It's by no means a perfect show.
I think because it traffics in so many ideas that you can, look at our conversation. We have touched on feminism and industrialization and capitalism and Black liberation and the immigrant experience. There's so many ideas.
The show is rich, and the characters are really, the characters maybe less successful. The music that Flaherty and Ahrens write for these characters is incredible. Yeah. New music. Just the kind of hit after hit. Even the fun ones, the kind of the little throwaway novelty songs are so good. They're so fun. It's just when I'm sitting in the theater watching Ragtime, every single song brings me joy. Not always, some of the songs are heartbreaking, but there's such, it's such a satisfying theatrical experience.
I remember seeing it at the Shaw Festival in Niagara-on-the-Lake, who had a fabulous production of it. And Thomas and I, at the end of the first act, where usually I'm wanting to jump out of my seat and stretch my legs because I'm cramped.
Go to the bathroom.
And go to the bathroom, obviously. I couldn't move for about 3 minutes, right? It was just, I was stuck in my seat with the power.
It's when theater becomes church. Yeah, exactly. It's a religious experience. And Ragtime gives us, is not afraid to move into that key. And when musicals do that well, there is nothing more. When musical becomes liturgy, there is nothing more powerful. That's why I'm a priest, is kind of for moments like that. And if I get them in theater, great. If I get them in church, great. I don't care where I get them. It's moments like that that remind me that, God is real. And this
Nathan,
isn't just all made up.
Nathan, we should do a podcast and call it something like The Gospel of Musical
The Gospel
Theater.
What a concept. Well, thank you for indulging me on my deep, nerdy love of Ragtime.
I'm glad you can hold the plot in your mind. I know what I know is that the 3 times I've seen this thing, I'm blown away every time.
Yeah.
And I think
it's
that's
not,
the cumulative.
the intricacies of the plot are not as important as what the show, I think, is trying to do.
The more it's an Easter egg. I mean, the more you kind of open this up, the more
There's
complexity. There's a lot going on
There's
here,
a lot to
and
talk
it's
about.
worth it.
There's a lot going on. Probably too much. Yeah, and so different productions make different choices. You cut different songs. I think the show has been trimmed very effectively. It's overlong. I mean, there's all kinds of things. So different productions can do different things, and that to me, like that's a show that can live then, right? Like it can change and grow as it needs to with new contexts, new companies, new social times that we live in, and we need the show to do different things for us. It doesn't do everything. It doesn't do everything perfectly, but I think there's power. There's power in the show. Certainly in 2024, with everything that we're going for, to think about the immigrant experience, how we encounter difference. All of those feel to me like really contemporary questions.
It's pretty rich, man.
Yeah.
Okay, until next time.
Until next time.
The Gospel of Musical Theater is a production of Trinity Episcopal Cathedral in Portland, Oregon. Join Peter and Nathan every other Friday right here in your podcast feed, and connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at gospelofmt. Learn more and support us at trinity-episcopal.org/podcasts. See you next time.